Hello everyone, welcome to another video on the channel. Welcome to this week's GT Sport Daily RAC Race and Strategy Guide. Week number 5 is taking us to a Daily RAC classic, in my opinion, of Group 2 cars at Suzuka Circuit in Japan. Has been a little while since we did this combo, but it is a bit of a classic. Definitely one I remember doing numerous times, and always a good race, always fairly popular as well. We've got 10 laps to get around in this one, tyre weight at times 7, fuel at times 2. We have the return of strategy for the first time in 4 weeks, I believe, with the medium and the hard tyres available, both of which should be mandatory. BOP is on, damage is off. We have the return of the rolling start after 3 weeks of grid starts, and don't worry, that bug where the car in P20 starts under the bridge has now been fixed, and slipstream is at real. So let's get on board the car. We're in the Nissan GTR 2016, of course. This will be the most popular car, no doubt. It just seems to be the meta for Group 2, even though I believe the NSX and the Lexus are pretty close in performance. I'm going to do a little test a little bit later on in the video, just give you an idea how they compare in terms of lap time, but it won't be anything too major, but that is for later on in the video. We've got the brake balance at +2 here on our Nissan GTR. That seemed to make sure the tyre wear was nice and even. So yeah, let's get into the strategy. We've got the medium and the hard tyres available. We're going to do the first test starting on the medium tyres, of course, and basically the strategy is fairly simple when you do the medium hard strategy. It's basically do a lap on the hard tyres, get an idea as into what sort of lap time you can do on the hard tyres. That then becomes your crossover lap time or your target lap time. In this case it's a 151.0. I probably could go a little bit quicker than that in the hard tyres, but it's very hard to be quite consistent around Suzuka. It's a very difficult track, very easy to make small mistakes and compromise your lap time. So even though I knew I could go a little bit faster than that 151.0 on the hard tyres, that was going to be my crossover lap time. So essentially, fairly simple philosophy: run the medium tyres until we're doing lap times in that 151 region, and then we know it's time to move on to those hard tyres because we should be quicker at that point. Now, I must admit, when I seen the settings for this one, I did think that it was going to be one of these races with just the tyre weight at ×7 on the medium tyres, where we're pretty much going to run the whole race on the medium tyres and just maybe do a single lap or 2 laps on the hard tyres. But I completely forgot about how much of a tyre muncher Suzuka is. I do remember David Perel talking about how much of a tyre muncher is in real life as well. But yeah, I thought we'd be able to do 8 or 9 laps on the medium tyres, no problem whatsoever. But it turned out that the lap time just absolutely tumbled. The tyre wear was quite bad, and by lap 5 and 6 it was definitely looking like we really should be coming into the pits. Probably could have pitted at the end of lap 5, but that actual lap time just had a very poor middle sector. But it was definitely time to come in at the end of lap number 6, and this will give us an idea of what sort of pit loss we're looking at. Fuel is no issue whatsoever. That will come in as no surprise at all. We very rarely get a fuel race in Daily RAC these days. I always think fuel just adds an extra dynamic to the race, particularly if we're all in the same car, so we're all battling the same dynamic with the fuel. But in terms of pit loss, it's 17.5 seconds. Fuel no issue, as I said. Do be careful as you exit the pits to stay within the white line there. I know most people won't, but it's very annoying when you're coming down the pit straight, somebody comes out the pits and just swings right in front of you without actually seeing you. Yeah, just try to be a little bit more gentlemanly or womanly, is that a word? I'm not sure, when you're exiting the pits, and be considerate to other drivers on the track. So moving on to take a look at how we kind of judged our hard tyre pace. We kind of did a 151.1 on lap 5. We were looking at a similar kind of lap time for lap number 6 as well, if we hadn't pitted. We didn't quite manage to kind of nail the initial laps on the hard tyres. A 151.2, a 151.0. I did feel we should be kind of into the sort of 150.7, 150.8 range, but we do kind of put a much better lap together here at the end of lap number 10, a 150.8. So for me, if you're starting on the medium tyres, it's looking around 5 laps for most people, 6 laps if you're pretty good on tyre wear. In terms of finishing time, we're looking at around 19 minutes, which is slightly longer than we've had in previous races. I still like to see an additional lap added on there, would have took us towards that 21 minute mark. I know it might have been kind of a little bit fine by the time you add in your warm up and waiting on the race finish, etc. to get into the next race. But I think it would have added an extra little element of strategy to this race if we'd had that additional lap. But that is the medium hard strategy. As you can see on the screen now, let's move on to the hard medium strategy, and just how early can you get off those hard tyres and move on to the medium tyres. So we are actually on here lap number 10. You can see we pitted on lap number 3. I do believe you can go earlier than that, certainly on lap 2. You probably can do lap 1 as well, but you are going to be suffering big time with the medium tyres at the end. But the undercut in this one is going to be huge. The kind of disparity between the tyres when they're both in the kind of same life is around about 1.4, 1.5 seconds. If you then go for an early pit stop, you're gaining 1.5 seconds over the cars around you, just on tyre wear alone or tyre performance alone, and then throw in the fact that maybe the cars you're racing with are in dirty air or battling with other drivers, you could be looking at gaining 3 seconds a lap on some of the other drivers around you. If they then pit 2 laps, 3 laps after you, you're looking at a 6 to 9 second gain, which is going to be huge. It's going to be very hard for other drivers to run that down, even if your tyres are very bad shape towards the end. But yeah, just something to bear in mind. I think the undercut here is going to be absolutely enormous. In terms of the strategy we did here, we did 3 laps on the hard tyres, we're doing 7 laps on the medium tyres. You can see the medium tyres held up absolutely fantastically for 5 laps. They did then start to fall away quite dramatically, losing a second between lap 8 and lap number 9. We did do a 150.4 here to finish, so just a poor lap on my part for lap 9. But yeah, the medium tyres can certainly do 7 laps fairly easily. If you're good on tyre wear, maybe more like 6 laps for some of the pad runners out there if you're just not that comfortable looking after the tyres. I certainly wouldn't be recommending the 5-5 split. I think the undercut is too big for that, and you will lose out massively if you leave your pit stop as late as lap number 5, going from the hards to the mediums. Next up on the agenda is just a little bit of a warning about this track. We all know it, Suzuka is an extremely dangerous track. There's so many corners out there that are able to catch you out. That AstroTurf on the outside of the likes of turn 1, where we had several incidents over the course of making this video, but also at Spoon as well. And that's another danger corner here we're looking at. I think it's a Dunlop curb or curve. You just kind of slightly run it too wide. As soon as you put a pixel on that grass, it's taking you out and you're going to run wide. But yeah, turn 1, particularly on lap number 1 as well, just be very careful. Just get it drilled into your head, particularly if you're on the hard tyres. You've got cold tyres, you're not up to temperature. Just take it nice and easy into turn number 1. There is absolutely nothing to gain by trying to be the last of the late breakers on lap number 1, but everything to lose. So we have reached that point of the video where we just reiterate all the information that we have looked at so far. In terms of strategy, we'll just kind of go back over it very briefly. The medium hard strategy, this is obviously the best strategy to use when you're starting near the front. You can actually utilise the pace of the medium tyres. This strategy though can be very quickly unfolded by somebody starting on the hard tyres in front of you. One little trick that I tend to use is in the warm-up is go to the track as quickly as you can and just look at what tyres people are starting on. You might not be able to see the driver just in front of you, but sometimes you do. It just gives you a little hint as into what tyres the drivers in front of you are starting on, and then maybe you can adjust your decision based on that, although you do have to be very quick. The mediums will last around about 5 to 6 laps before hard tyres become faster. 6 laps if you're good at looking after the tyres, 5 laps if you're maybe on the pad and not so comfortable at looking after those tyres. In terms of the hard medium strategy, best obviously used if you're starting towards the mid or the back of the grid, as the potential of the medium tyres will be lost in dirty air and fighting with other drivers. You could pit as early as lap 2, probably lap 1 if you really wanted to risk it. But most drivers will be much more comfortable with laps 3 or 4. Just note though that the undercut effect will be huge here. Anybody pitting very early is going to get a massive undercut on the drivers around them, although they are going to be dying on their tyres towards the end. However, with the dirty air and the infighting, it is a strategy that can work if you can just get that gap and be able to run comfortably in clean air. One other thing I do want to mention as well, with the pit loss only being around 17.5 seconds, if you start in the hard tyres towards the front, pit at the end of maybe lap 2 or 3, just remember that field spread is going to have occurred by then. There's every danger you are going to be pitting into some traffic, so definitely something to look out for. But all in all, a pretty decent race. I am looking forward to it. Nice to have the return of strategy to the fold as well. It has been a while. But yeah, I think that's everything we need to say about the strategy. Let's move on to do a quick car comparison. So first up, we've got the Nissan GTR from 2016. Obviously, we used this car during the testing as well, and we all know that the Nissan from 2016 is definitely the most popular car, if not the meta car for the category, and it's just a very, very solid all-rounder. It doesn't really do anything particularly well, doesn't really do anything wrong. One thing I'm not a big fan of with the Nissan GTR from 2016 is the kind of turbo lag. I've never really been a fan of the way the power comes in when you come out of slow corners, and that's definitely presented me with some problems in the past. But this will be the car you see the most of. Most people will be in this car as per any Group 2 race. Moving on to the Lexus RCF. Now this is probably my favourite car in Group 2, particularly out of the 2016 models. Very much like the GTR, only just a little bit more solid in my opinion. Comes without that turbo lag as well, so I feel like you can have a little bit more confidence getting on the power out of the slow corners. A lot of people say this car is better on tyre wear. It's not really something I've particularly noticed when I sort of drive this car in between the Nissan and the GTR, but perhaps just the fact it's a little bit more stable means that when the tyres wear, it just feels a little bit more comfortable to drive. But in terms of speed, very much on par with the Nissan GTR. I'm not really entirely sure why we don't see more people in the Lexus. They just seem to flock to the GTR, even though in any testing I've ever done, I've never really found that much difference between them in terms of pace. And finally, the car we have tested lastly is the Honda NSX from 2016. Now I did put a little bit of time into this car to try and get a decent lap, but immediately I could just feel it was a little bit of a death trap, particularly into turn number 1, which you'll see in around about 20 seconds from now. But yeah, just had a very, very loose rear end. Even when the tyres were at a kind of full working capacity, nice and fresh, I can only imagine that problem gets more and more exacerbated as the race was going on. But as we come down towards turn number 1 here, this was a real problem corner in this car. If you can get it through turn number 1, it is a little bit of a weapon in the first sector because we did constantly go purple. But yeah, this big snap, bit of oversteer here, unable to catch that, and yeah, that was all I needed to know that I'm not going to be doing too many races in the Honda NSX in this race. There will be people out there who will be able to tame this car, and I'm sure it's every bit as quick as the GTR and the Lexus, but it is definitely far harder to drive overall. Well, that's the cars. Let's move on to the final part of the video. It's going to be a lap guide in the Nissan GTR 2016. Brake balance at +2, we're on the start finish straight here, heading down towards one of the most dangerous corners on the track, although there aren't many. You're looking for the grey little path on the left hand side. You can't actually go beyond that. Trail braking into the first part of turn number 1, try to get into the apex for turn number 2. Coming into the first of the S's, I leave it in 4th gear, just a little bit of a lift off the throttle, down into 3rd gear for the second, bring the car over to the right hand side to kind of get the optimal line through the 4th and 5th part. Keep it nice and tight here, sacrifice a little bit of the road to get a better entry into Dunlop. Very dangerous corner this. It's very easy to get on the throttle just a little bit too early, clip the grass on the outside as we've seen earlier in the video, and off you go. Just before the 50 metre board for Degner number 1, take a lot of curb there. Just be very careful into Degner number 2 as well. The car will try to oversteer there on most instances. Coming up towards the hairpin now, you look for the curb on the right hand side. Just before the end of that, get the car in a straight line, get all the braking done in a straight line and get it in for a nice tight apex. Get the car strained as much as you can. Early you go on the throttle, you carry all that speed up this, what is technically called a straight, but it's not actually straight in the slightest, towards Spoon Corner. Path on the right hand side is your braking reference for Spoon. 3rd or 4th gear for the first part, 3rd or 2nd gear for the second part. Second part of Spoon is on a kind of slightly off camber, so again it encourages to get onto the throttle sometimes. You can just do it a little bit too early, it can drag you wide, and before you know it you're facing into the barrier. 130R is full throttle on both the medium and the hard tyres, but you do need to get the line right. And for the Casio Triangle, you're looking for the 100 metre board, but you want to be kind of maybe about 20 metres before that. Very easy to outbrake yourself into the Casio Triangle. Use lots and lots of curb. If the 100 metre board gets knocked out on the side of the track, there is one on the wall as well. That's always a good thing to remember for the Casio Triangle. That's a lap of Suzuka in the Nissan GTR. Hopefully that's been useful in some way, shape or form. Hopefully the guide as a whole has been useful in some way, shape or form. As I said earlier, very much looking forward to this one. Nice to be back at Suzuka in the Group 2 cars. Nice to have some strategy as well. We'll certainly be hitting a live streaming at least twice this week as we do this one. Hopefully I stream on the Monday morning into Monday afternoon. I finish up work on Wednesday morning. I'm off for 5 days after that, so we'll definitely return to the live stream a couple of times as this week progresses, hopefully. But if you can join me for them, I'd be super appreciated. And until then, thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one. Goodbye now.